We're about to commence another session of the Citizens Grand Jury with Prosecutor Larry Klayman. Larry, jurors, welcome everyone.
Welcome.
Larry, today we're going to be talking about this raid on Rudy Giuliani's home office, basically the most tyrannical invasion of the sacrosanct attorney-client privilege since the last time the FBI raided one of Donald Trump's attorneys.
Well, that's right. And this adds a new count to our indictment against Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden, primarily Joe Biden. It amounts to an obstruction of justice. There's a symmetry here with regard to the bribery scheme of what Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and his son and his brother, James Biden, undertook, because the bribery extended not just to communist China, but also Ukraine and Russia. And of course, now we have procured the preliminary findings of the grand jury with regard to indicting Biden with regard to this bribery scheme, where Tony Bobulinski, as we've seen several times now, at least twice, testified on cable television, in effect, and that is valid for a citizens' grand jury, that Joe Biden was to receive a 10% cut of these millions of dollars that were laundered into the coffers of the Biden family. Now, the FBI, which I'm sure that the agents object to the way they're being used, has been used like a Gestapo of Biden and Harris. And they raided Giuliani's office and they raided his home. And what was the issue? The issue was whether or not, apparently, from what is publicly available, whether Giuliani properly registered as a foreign agent when he did work either on behalf of his own law firm or President Trump. That's, of course, Giuliani's defense, that he was there on behalf of the president with regard to the Ukraine and dealing with a prosecutor there that was laying off of a proper investigation of Hunter Biden and what was going on, because we know money's flowed. We know that from the information that previously was presented to the Citizens Grand Jury, particularly what had been researched in detail by Peter Schweitzer in his two books, one of which is Profiles in Corruption, and the other one, The Secret Empire. So we all have all of this evidence, and we also have Senate reports about bribery from the Ukraine, yet the person who claims to have uncovered it, Giuliani, is now has his house raided, attorney-client privilege violated with his clients, and intimidated. And this is also a message, not just to Giuliani, and it's not just a way to obstruct justice, because when the FBI goes in and takes your files, they're in effect taking the evidence off the market. And that is the game that is being played. But there's also a message to the American people and to everyone that challenges the actions of Biden and Harris and this leftist administration, which has, turned this country, many people believe, into a socialist, if not communist dictatorship. It actually tells everyone who opposes them that you could meet a similar fate, that you will be subject to raids and criminal prosecutions and whatever. And couple that with what the collaboration with big tech in terms of people being canceled. That's a nice way of putting it, censored. But also there are reports this week, and we'll get into that in a subsequent grand jury, that the Biden-Harris administration has asked big tech and other private companies to conduct mass surveillance on the American people, presumably anyone that challenges the administration, because that's a way that they think they can get around, what I preliminarily enjoined twice a number of years ago with regard to the NSA during the Obama-Biden administration. That was the mass surveillance that they were doing on the American people, including Trump, including me, including others who were their adversaries, they perceived to be anyway. And that was held to be a violation, an unconstitutional violation of the Fourth Amendment. So this is very, very important that we seek an indictment.
Larry, may
what
I ask
happened
a
with
quick
Giuliani?
question? I have a quick question, because
Yes.
you've raised a very important point that I have a question about. So you're talking about how the FBI taking these documents from Rudy Giuliani effectively takes the evidence off the market. Isn't it true, Larry, that this now creates an opportunity for them to claim that anything that they've found is a matter of national security and can't be used in a criminal investigation, a civil investigation, squelch all that information? And doesn't it also chill any other attorney who might consider representing Donald Trump in any matter?
Well, yes, you're mostly right there. They're not worried about whether there's going to be a national security issue or not. That's for Giuliani's lawyers to worry about and to maintain. These materials will be used. They'll be used, presumably, to have him indicted. And, then it will become an issue as to whether or not this information can be made public during any criminal prosecution. And there are ways to get around that. Things can be done in camera. The jury can be sequestered, that kind of thing, in terms of seeing this information and not making it public. So there are lots of ways to get around that. But you're right. This is a message to anyone that seeks to challenge this administration or defend anyone that was involved in the Trump administration, that to do so, they do so at great peril. And it was not just Giuliani who was raided, but apparently Victoria Tenzing and Joe DeGeneva, who also had played some role in representing clients concerning the Ukraine. The FBI went in and with a warrant and seized her cell phone. And this implicates attorney-client privilege. And when I, in fact, joined the National Security Agency years ago, I was the lead plaintiff. The case is called Klayman versus Obama, because I maintained that this violated my attorney-client privilege, the fact that they were spying on me, among many others, such as judges, even Supreme Court judges, lower court judges, Donald Trump, prominent businessmen that were involved in TARP, that kind of thing. So this is extremely serious, and it's an obstruction of justice. And who, of course, is sitting atop that Justice Department but Merrick Garland, and this matter had to go up to him. So we'll be looking at whether he should be held legally accountable as well in terms of seeking an indictment. I mean, we cannot turn the cheek on what goes on here, because this Justice Department, of which I was once a proud alumnus, I saw politics there, but I didn't see it to this extent. And I wrote about it in my book, Horse It Takes to Rub Horse, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. But the Justice Department is being used currently, in my opinion, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, as Biden Harris's own Gestapo. And I'm sure these agents, are objecting to that. They tend to be conservative. They tend not to want to do these things, but they're being ordered to do these things. So rounding up everybody that was in Washington virtually, on January 6th, telling them to turn their cell phones over, to rat out people that were there with them. They're even intimidating, police that were there. A number of people have been indicted. Federal judges are backing this up and effectively threatening anybody who, protests against this administration. Very veiled threats. There, 2 judges in the district court just last week made similar statements in hearings or in orders that were issued. It's a total attempt to allow this administration to take, which it already has, total control over the American people. And what really concerns this citizens' grand jury, when I talk to the grand jurors right now, is the fact that this is an obstruction of justice and our governmental entities are being abused. So with that being said, let's roll the videotape, so to speak, of Rudy Giuliani, what happened to him. And again, the same thing happened to Victoria Tenzing and Joe DeGeneva, who were working with Giuliani and also represented some clients with regard to the Ukraine, because as we laid out to the citizens' grand jury, Hunter Biden laundered money, from the Ukraine into the Biden family accounts, in addition to communist China and Russia. So there's a method to this illegal madness.
Larry, before we roll the video, I just want to remind viewers that we can't do these citizens' grand juries without your support. Please visit freedomwatchusa.org and make a tax-deductible contribution to help Larry and his legal team continue the work that they're doing to really mete out justice in a way that the Department of Justice is no longer willing to do. Larry's helping us all learn about how the Citizens Grand Jury is the property of we the people, and it's an important service that he's doing via Freedom Watch. And remember, if you donate more than $50, you're going to get a physical copy of Larry's book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. I also want to remind viewers that they can support Crowdsource the Truth by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Let's take a quick look at this video, Larry.
Now, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani just learned that lesson the hard way yesterday when federal agents raided his home and took his files. By our count, Rudy Giuliani is at least the third attorney to have his personal communications with former President Donald Trump seized by the Justice Department. Sense a theme here? Rudy Giuliani joins us to tell us what happened. Mr. Mayor, thanks so much for coming on. Now, if you'd been reading the Twitter feed of the Lincoln Project, the Democratic hacks who got Joe Biden elected, you would have known that federal agents were about to raid your home. They knew before you did. But apparently you weren't. Tell us what happened yesterday.
Well, about 6 o'clock in the morning, there was a big bang, bang, bang on the door. And outside were seven FBI agents with a warrant for electronics. And I looked at the warrant and I said, this is extraordinary because I've offered to give these to the government and talk it over with the government for 2 years. I don't know why they have to do this. The agents seemed somewhat apologetic, I might say. They were very, very professional and very gentlemanly. The only time they got perturbed is at the end of the search when they had taken about, I'd say, 7 or 8 electronic items of mine, which is what they took, and 2 of someone else's. They weren't taking the 3 hard drives, which, of course, are electronic devices. They just mimic the computer. I said, well, don't you want these? And they said, what are they? I said, those are Hunter Biden's hard drives. And they said, no. I said, are you sure you don't want them? I mean, the warrant required them to take it. And they said, no. And one last time I said, don't you think you should take it and they said no. Now, Hunter Biden's hard drives fall within the scope of the subpoena. The subpoena required them to take all electronics, but they decided to leave that behind. And they also were completely content to rely on my word that these were Hunter Biden's hard drives. I mean, they could have been Donald Trump's. They could have been Vladimir Putin's. They could have been anybody's. But they relied on me, the man who had to be raided in the morning, because I'm going to destroy the evidence. I've known about this for 2 years, Tucker. I could have destroyed the evidence a year. I didn't destroy the evidence because the evidence is exculpatory. It proves that the president and I and all of us are innocent. They're the ones who are committing. It's like projection. They're committing the crimes. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, may I just interject to say it's, I think, literally projection. So from what we have read in the press, the Department of Justice wants to know whether you violated FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, in representing foreign nationals, Ukrainians, for pay. You didn't register. They're saying that may have been a crime. We know for a fact that Hunter Biden did that. He didn't register under FARA. He represented Ukrainians. He probably made a lot more than you did. He also represented Chinese nationals, lobbying his dad. And he has not been charged with a FARA violation. Am I missing something here?
Yeah, you're missing, equal administration of justice, which is what we don't have anymore. The reality is the hard drive contains somewhere between a dozen or more violations of FARA that are spelled out completely, failure to register. The fact is it also spells out, as we now know, a clear violation of the Gun Act. The application is a straight-out fraud. He says, I'm not an addict. We have a picture of him 5 days before smoking a crack pipe behind the wheel of a car and then saying under oath that he's not an addict. And it's the left that gets all perturbed about people who are mentally unstable having guns. Well, he was unstable. He's been, unfortunately and tragically, I feel sorry for that part of Hunter Biden. I think his father exploited him. But the reality is he's still a danger to the public if he's driving an automobile or holding a gun. But they don't care about that.
No,
they come and send it to my apartment when I'm willing to talk to them civilly myself And second, I can tell you, I never, ever represented a foreign national. In fact, I have in my contracts a refusal to do it because from the time I got out of being mayor, I didn't want to lobby. Never did it to Bush, never did it to Obama, never did it with Trump. And I can prove it. Just give me an opportunity. But they won't. Instead, they had a breakdown. I wouldn't say breakdown, but smash on my doors in a frightening way. Lucky I don't get frightened very easily. I handled them very professionally, and they handled me very professionally. I want to make that point. Also, Hunter, I am a lawyer who has prosecuted a lot more serious cases that have been prosecuted in the U.S. Attorney's Office since I left. And the reality is that that warrant is completely illegal. The only way you can get a search warrant is if you can show that there's some evidence that the person is going to destroy the evidence or is going to run away with the evidence. Well, I've had it for 2 years and I haven't destroyed it. And they also got it from the iCloud. So there was no justification for that warrant. It is an illegal, unconstitutional warrant, one of many that this Department of Injustice tragically has done. And it breaks my heart because I belong to the Justice Department, and I think I had a record that's a hell of a lot better than theirs.
Joe Biden said he didn't know, the Lincoln Project knew, the guys who covered up child molestation, but Joe Biden says he didn't know that this raid was coming. Do you take that at face value?
Maybe he doesn't remember. I'm not sure if he can retain anything for more than about, the time it takes to read it. But in any event, who cares if he knew or not? And the reality is how the Lincoln Project knowing means that they have a serious leak in a very important investigation. We have been warning them of that for 2 years. My lawyer, Bob Costello, has written to them 4 times to plug up the leaks. They've done nothing to do that.
So just to frame this, may I interrupt you? I should have done this at the outset. I just want to make absolutely certain that we understand, our viewers understand what it is the Justice Department says they're investigating. We've read it's a FARA violation. Is there something else? What have they said to you about what they're looking into?
They haven't said anything to me. They won't explain to me what they're looking into for 2 years. We've called them 5, 6 occasions, said, tell us what you're investigating. We'll come in and address it. No, just come in and talk to us. Tell us about your whole life. Of course, that's ridiculous. And so I have to go as a lawyer on the search warrant. The search warrant is purportedly based on one single failure to file for representing a Ukrainian national or official that I never represented. I've never represented a Ukrainian national or official before the United States government. I've declined it several times. I've had contracts in countries like Ukraine. In the contract is a clause that says I will not engage in lobbying or foreign representation. I don't do it because I felt it would be too compromising. Here I am in the middle of representing the President of the United States on a charge that I believe he was innocent of. I had great passion about that. If you're a lawyer and you're representing an innocent man, there's no greater burden you can have. And my sole concentration, and I am so offended by the things they've said about me, my sole concentration from the beginning here, Tucker, was to find evidence that would prove what I knew, that he was innocent of Russian collusion and that he was innocent of doing anything improper. He did exactly what a president should do with the president of Ukraine. He asked him to investigate a vice president who violated our laws over and over again. 30 years of the Biden crime family violating our laws. That is what is on the hard drive that they have censored. And that's why they want to put me in jail.
One of the great ironies is the Democratic Party is hysterical on the subject of Russia, in part because they've taken so much money from Ukraine, which of course fears Russia and has for an awful long time. They're being paid to hate Russia. But let me just ask you, so now they've taken your phone, they've got all your texts, they've got all your digital communications. So unless you've been in mass 12 hours a day for the last 5 years, is there anybody who could, no, it's a sincere question. Is there anybody who, if the Justice Department was out for you and they've got every text you've ever sent and every email, that they couldn't find something to charge you with? Do you think this is going to remain a FARA investigation, or could it get much bigger quickly?
Well, I think it should get much bigger. I think they should be investigated for blatantly violating my constitutional rights, the president's constitutional rights, in the middle of the impeachment defense. They invaded, without telling me, my iCloud. They took documents that are privileged, and then they unilaterally decided what they could read and not read. So the prosecutors, the Justice Department, spied on me. And that is, if that is not taken seriously, if that doesn't result in their being sanctioned, the case being dismissed, and it's stopping, this is no longer a free. We might as well be in, East Berlin before the wall fell. This is tactics only known in a dictatorship, where you seize a lawyer's records right in the middle of his representation of his client. You should be prosecuted and disbarred for that. You shouldn't be prosecuting somebody else.
I agree with that. I agree with that uncritically.
They're a disgrace to a great department. They're a disgrace to a great department that I served honorably and well.
It's shocking. I hope you'll come back. I have a feeling we're going to be hearing a lot about this story. Former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, thank you.
Larry, if I could just add one technical piece on iCloud for people who perhaps are not.
Let me just do this real quickly. My assistant, would you send Jason those jury findings right now?
I want to put a little emphasis on what Mayor Giuliani said about this invasion of iCloud. For people who aren't Mac or iOS users, iCloud is designed to integrate with your computer in such a way that many people might not even realize they're saving documents to iCloud versus something on their own personal computer. So what they've essentially done is, without telling Rudy Giuliani, this is like breaking into the office, taking documents, perusing them, and just never revealing it to the attorney. It's a gross violation of rights, privacy, the attorney-client privilege.
There are many things that are going on here. And Giuliani, as I suggested when he was representing President Trump, should bring lawsuits against him, just like I did. Giuliani, as much as I sympathize with him, was not terribly strong in representing President Trump. These people should have been sued for the illegal surveillance, just like I sued on my behalf and on behalf of my clients. But you're right, Jason. And there were many ways that this material could have been obtained other than doing a raid on his house, on his apartment, and also on his office. The government, the NSA already had these documents, as a matter of fact. They could have subpoenaed those documents. They didn't need to do a raid. So this was a message to the American people. Do not challenge us. We are in total control of this government. We will never give it up. And we'll use even the FBI. And Giuliani said something similar to what I just said. I talked about the Gestapo. He's talking about the East German Stasi. These are the techniques that are used in communist countries and dictatorships. And this Department of Justice, who I've long called the Department of Injustice, I feel the same way he does, because I was proud to be a Justice Department attorney, has turned into a cesspool of corruption. And we can see that on nearly every front. And backing them up are these federal judges who rubber stamp what they do with warrants, who themselves make statements frightening the American people, as occurred last week with regard to individuals that were in the Capitol, walked into the Capitol who didn't harm anybody. That's what we're dealing with. So this is obstruction of justice. And my assistant is sending to you those jury forms. And in addition to the other forms that we sent you earlier, which you've returned, the grand jurors have returned. And if you have not, then please do so. Send them to me by email, leklayman@gmail.com, or you can send them by Federal Express or just even by mail. I'll give you the address off screen. For security reasons, I don't give it out. But here is the crux of it. These people need to be held accountable. Now let's play the interview on Hannity, a more serious interview than his interview apparently last night of Caitlyn Jenner, which was to generate ratings. This is much more important than Caitlyn Jenner running for governor in California.
An hour and a half ago, I spoke to former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Here's that interview. Former New York City Mayor and former federal prosecutor and attorney to President Trump, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, there's a lot to unpack here. Now, my understanding is a FARA violation is very specific. At the time when we had the impeachment of the president over the phone call, that the infamous phone call of hearsay anonymous whistleblower, you were investigating the issues involving Joe Biden, leveraging $1 billion taxpayer dollars, and his son Hunter and the firing of this prosecutor. Was that the only reason you were investigating Ukraine and involved with the Ukrainians?
100%. This was 2 years before the election. It had nothing to do with the election. I was brought into it when the allegations of corruption in the Ukraine were given to me, which included corruption by Joe Biden, as well as a tremendous amount of dirt that was dug up on the Trumps, which Hillary paid for. And in the course of that, I was told by the Ukrainians, you know, he got a big bribe. Biden made a big bribe here. He pushed the president of Ukraine to get rid of a case on one of the crookedest guys in Ukraine, Zlochevsky, and he made a big score. So, you know, this money for Hunter Biden is not for Hunter Biden.
We got that tape of Joe. You heard Hunter on Good Morning America. Do you think he deserved the millions from all these countries with no experience?
Yeah. But they want me out because I'm the one who uncovered it and brought it to light. And I came on your show and I talked about it. And also, the hard drive was given to me because the guy didn't trust anybody else. He didn't trust the FBI because the FBI had it for almost a year and did nothing with it.
So I want to get to that very question. That was my question. You did nothing that would at all trigger any FARA violation whatsoever, and that
Absolutely
your work
not.
and investigative work had to do with Burisma, Joe Biden, withholding $1 billion, the prosecutor, and Hunter's lack of experience?
100%. In fact, in the course of my career, I have turned down multiple opportunities to lobby, to do FARA. And when I do contracts, I very often, if there's any issue, I put in a clause saying I will not do it. I was representing the President of the United States. The whole world knew that. The whole world knew it. And this is totally done because they want to destroy my credibility because I have that entire hard drive. I have the whole thing. I put it out to the New York Post. And since then, they have been persecuting me. They've been threatening me. They have done everything they can to destroy every business relationship I have. They have put out all kinds of false stories, the most recent of which was the ridiculous story that I was briefed by the FBI, a total lie by 3 newspapers who spend most of their time lying. But if they're lying about that, isn't it obvious they're lying about everything else? If the FBI is lying to them about briefing me, well, don't you think the FBI is lying about the rest of it?
I want to go to this issue about prosecutors accessing your iCloud account in early 2019. This is leading right up into the impeachment, if I'm not mistaken. And Professor Dershowitz talked about it this weekend and was very outspoken. And he said in banana republics in Castro's Cuba, when a candidate loses the presidency, they go after the candidate, they go after his lawyers, they go after his friends. And speaking directly about your case, a search warrant on a lawyer, doctor, or priest, you can't use search warrants. You don't use them when people have privileged information on cell phones and computers. You use a subpoena. And he believes you have, you and your attorney were told that the surveillance of you happened in 2019?
Yeah, here's what I was told. I'll try to repeat it exactly. My attorney, Robert Costello, was told that they obtained a covert warrant, and the date of the warrant was from May 1st, 2018 until November 4, 2019. They took everything on my iCloud from that period of time. Now, interestingly, May 1st is when I started representing Donald Trump. They wanted nothing on me before that. So you can't say that their main interest wasn't Donald Trump. So just about the day that I begin representing him is the day they go invade my iCloud. So try telling somebody that it wasn't to get the material on Donald Trump. And then they have a year and a half of material all through my representation of him during the complete fraud of a collusion thing. And then all during my representation of him during the Ukrainian thing up until November 4. They have had that for a year and a half and haven't been able to produce a single allegation against me. I've had it for a year and a half.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News.
There we go, Larry.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Okay. This is obstruction of justice. It's illegal. And note that in 2019, who was the president of the United States? Donald Trump. It tells you about the deep state, which is embedded inside the Justice Department and its FBI. The director, Wray, is basically just, a yes man for, whoever happens to be in control of that department at the time. And ironically, the Attorney General was Bill Barr. What was he doing? What did he know? This was a Republican. So it tells you that the corruption's on both sides, and the Washington swamp, the Washington establishment, this deep state does not like individuals like Donald Trump that try to change things. They want things to remain the same. They're making huge amounts of money, hand over fist, acquiring power, both political parties, and they're both complicit. Where was the Judiciary Committee over this that was then run by Lindsey Graham? So this is why we're going to hold them all accountable, Democrats and Republicans, and we'll be looking into the involvement, of the Justice Department, both attorney generals and FBI directors, and what went on, as well as federal judges who undoubtedly rubber stamped these warrants, just like they did with regard during the Russian collusion investigation and the Steele dossier and that whole caper that was going on. In any event, Jason, my assistant should have sent to you these jury verdict forms. Let's hold on them for the time being. And let's play a video with regard to John Kerry, because more information is coming out in that regard. And we're also seeking his indictment for releasing classified information to the Iranians that the Iranians boasted, in fact, that they got, and it's on audio tape.
Comment or reaction to Kerry telling the Iranians about covert military action on the part of Israel?
We're not going to comment on leaked tapes.
You go back and look at press reporting from the time, this certainly was not secret, and governments that were involved were speaking to this publicly on the record.
John Kerry facing a potential firestorm tonight following a leaked admission by Iran's foreign minister that the former Secretary of State informed him of Israeli attacks on Iranian interests in Syria. Kerry denying it all tonight, tweeting that, quote, "I can tell you that this story and these allegations are unequivocally false. This has never happened, either when I was Secretary of State or since." So let's discuss these latest developments with the host of The Next Revolution, Steve Hilton, and former State Department senior advisor, Christian Whiten. So, guys, I want to start by popping up on your screen exactly what the Iranian foreign minister is quoted as saying. And I just want to reiterate, this is coming from a leaked audio tape that was leaked to a British paper. Fox doesn't have it. We haven't confirmed it. But let's just take it for what it is and take it from there. So he says, Zarif says that, quote, "It was former U.S. Foreign Secretary John Kerry who told me that Israel had launched more than 200 attacks on Iranian forces in Syria." Steve, if true, how much trouble should John Kerry be in?
Well, there's two questions. It's how much trouble should he be in and how much trouble is he in? On the first, he should be in a huge amount of trouble because it is truly disgusting that it appears he's taken the side of a terrorist theocracy, an enemy of any decent person in the world, over Israel, a democracy, one of our closest allies. And he's taken the side. It's not for the first time, by the way. He denies it, but he's got form on this. I mean, this is something that we've seen him do time and time again. He's desperate to revive the deal that he was involved in negotiating. And so this fits with previous behavior. The problem is, however, that I don't think actually these days in the modern Democratic Party, he will get in much trouble over this because truthfully, this attitude, this mindset of certainly siding, if not directly with Iran, certainly the hatred for Israel that's there in the modern left in this country means that this kind of fits with how his party thinks. And so I think he'll be fine with this.
Well, since you bring up some of Kerry's past statements in terms of how he's treated his interactions with world leaders since leaving, his time in the Obama administration, I want to pop up this clip from John Kerry on Bill Maher's show back in 2018. Watch this, and I'll get your take on the other side.
You're out of office, and you met with the Iranian, or talked to the Iranian.
Well, I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But that's been done before?
Everybody does. Well, Henry Kissinger for 40 years has been traveling to Russia, traveling to China, talks with the leaders. There's absolutely nothing, unusual about it.
So in the context of what we know now, what do you make of that, Christian?
Well, it fits a pattern with John Kerry. Go back to his debut in public life for the United States. He actually, while he was still in the U.S. Naval Reserve in 1970, went to Paris and had meetings with the North Vietnamese, who we were engaged against in a war at that time. Fast forward to when he was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He went and had a very pleasurable dinner with Assad, the dictator of Syria. That was before the open warfare there, but a lot of bad guys. There's a history of John Kerry thinking that he can use the John Kerry charm on dictators and outright enemies of the United States. What are the results of that? It's pretty appalling. John Kerry, I have to say, on the Trump transition, he was still Secretary of State. He was traveling until the very last day, presumably trying to undermine the foreign policy of the incoming administration. We treated him extremely cautiously. He wanted meetings. He wanted public meetings with Rex Tillerson, the nominee for Secretary of State. We said politely no thanks to that. So this is someone who just has a real problem with enemy identification.
Well, a lot of Republicans are now calling for his resignation. He's, of course, denying it, so we'll see where this story takes us. Meanwhile, it's also a big week for President Joe Biden. He's going to be hitting his 100-day mark. He's got his first address to a joint session of Congress on Wednesday. And we've got brand new Fox News polls to commemorate the occasion. Let's pop this first one up showing President Biden's job performance approval ratings. He's got a 54% approval rating, 43% disapprove of the job that he's done. And so how does this compare? Well, if we take a look at that little reminder, you can see that both Presidents Bush and Obama were doing a bit better at 63 and 62%. President Biden at 54, President Trump at 45. So I guess my question is, Steve, when you look at where he stands in the history of where he stacks up among his recent predecessors, is that enough for President Biden to make the case that he's been making, which is that he has broad bipartisan support for a lot of these spending bills that he's trying to push through, even if he doesn't have Republican support on Capitol Hill, congressional support? That's the distinction that they're making. Is that enough based on the approval ratings that you just saw there?
No, because if you go back before these polls and just look at the mandate that he has, the election results in 2020 was very closely divided. The presidential race in the end decided by 30,000 votes in the Electoral College. The Senate, 50-50. The House, the margin reduced to just a tiny number, not giving Nancy Pelosi much room to maneuver right around the country. Republicans doing well in governor's races and state houses. It was an evenly divided country. If America wanted to give Joe Biden untrammeled power to push through a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren agenda, that would have happened. It didn't happen. He's got no mandate for this. The fact that he's got relatively high approval numbers, not historically, but certainly compared to a couple of previous presidents, what does that reflect? Not the popularity of his agenda. It reflects the biggest accomplishment of his predecessor, President Trump, in getting those vaccines that everyone said would take 5 years done within a year, which means that the economy is opening up, jobs are coming back, people are feeling that sense of getting past the pandemic. That's all thanks to President Trump. It's not because of Biden's agenda.
Christian, do you think that President Biden has a mandate to pass the kinds of spending bills that he is trying to get through Congress right now?
This is getting into politics, but
yep.
What I want to emphasize with Kerry is that there's a concept in the law that if there's a pattern and practice of conduct it gives rise to an inference that something happened in this instance. And my client and colleague and friend, Jerry Corsi, wrote a book. It was called Unfit for Command, which cost John Kerry the election when he ran against George W. Bush. I mean, basically, this is my own personal opinion. We had a traitor running against an idiot, and the idiot won. We can see him making statements these days, trashing his own party, which frankly does nothing in any event. But this is the problem. And, John Kerry is a traitor, so we sought his indictment over sedition here. And there's enough evidence to get it. Again, it's just probable cause. It's a very low standard at this point, and he'll have an opportunity to prove his innocence if he chooses to appear in a citizen's court over what happened. But this is very serious. And, there were also statements by Steve, I forget his name, of the Revolution on Fox News about Kerry hating Israel. It's beyond that. He's an anti-Semite. And the party's become anti-Semite and anti-Christian for that matter. You've got Ilham Omar, you've got Rashida Tlaib, you've got Alessandro Ocasio-Cortez, You've got all these people. And the United States happens to depend on Israel for intelligence. The operations that occurred in Syria were obviously done with American involvement. Netanyahu in Israel, has a relationship with Putin. Putin allows him to operate in Syria. This jeopardizes all of that. And it's very, very serious. So these are the two things that we're focusing on today. We're going to keep this session relatively short. Jason, put up on the screen the preliminary findings of the grand jury. We're adding an obstruction of justice count with regard to Joe Biden. And so I want the grand jurors to see that. We will email that to you. And if you agree that there's probable cause, circle that and send it back. And then we will prepare, as more information is available, a detailed indictment of John Kerry. We will prepare a detailed indictment with regard to Joe Biden, his son Hunter, and also with regard to James Biden. And you'll have an opportunity with your foreman to go through that and edit it and issue it. I'm asking for indictments in that regard. And we're also sending to you one with regard to Mitch McConnell, who we presented evidence, also laundered money through his wife, Elaine Chao, from communist China. So this is the kind of thing that implicates both political parties and the leaders of both parties. So something that American people have to keep in mind. This is not a partisan exercise. This is an exercise because our government, regrettably, is corrupt to the core. And while this is not part of the Citizens Grand Jury, I want to call everybody's attention to the fact that on July 5th and 6th in Philadelphia, Freedom Watch will be holding a Third Continental Convention. Jason will be there. He'll be televising it, live streaming it. And the purpose is, as in the Second Continental Congress, to declare independence from this corrupt government. And we will do it peacefully and we will do it legally. And as it says in our Declaration of Independence, when the government no longer represents the people, I use the term government very loosely in this instance, that the people have a right under the laws of nature, and nature's God, to alter or abolish that government and to form a new government with equal rights for everyone, inalienable rights for everyone, in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. So we're going to be discussing that with learned people throughout this country. You're invited to attend. We will have a peaceful rally in Independence Square. More information will be put up on our website shortly at freedomwatchusa.org. We're going to be discussing how we make some modifications or additions to our Constitution, reenacting it, such as coming up with a method for elections which are not based on fraud and other irregularities, such as making it clear that government officials don't have immunity, that judges don't have immunity. They have to answer to the same laws that we answer to. And also that there will be discrimination put into the Constitution on the basis of ideology and political belief, not just sex, national origin, religion, and race. So this is important. We're going to put it in explicitly. the Supreme Court, if you want to call that Supreme Court as well, has read things into the Constitution that don't exist. But we're going to put this in explicitly. And it's time that we start this dialogue with the American people, because this government that currently rules over us is irreparably corrupt and broken, and there's no judicial system that will redress our grievances. It's far worse than occurred during the days leading up to July 4th, 1776. King George III was not a socialist. King George III was not a communist. King George III was not an atheist. He was not a radical of all these other groups. Most of the people in these groups are good people, but the radicals have taken over this country. And remember, the reason for the Declaration of Independence is that the king was overtaxing the colonies to pay for the rest of his empire. And when they complained, he took our legal system back to London, England, the criminal justice system, and deprived us of our legal system. And last but not least, when hostilities broke out, because the Revolutionary War really began before July 4th, 1776, at Lexington and Concord in New York City, he sought to seize our guns, our method of self-defense. Sound familiar as to what's happening today? And you just saw it with Rudy Giuliani. The legal system does not exist. There's no judge that will stand up for the American people currently. None, absolutely none. And there's no person, frankly, who will stand up in any other respect. So we must stand up for ourselves. The American people must rise up. And one way, as I say in my book, it takes a revolution, which I hope you'll read in addition to the Declaration of Independence. You can get it at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, the Freedom Watch with a contribution of $50 or more that helps us do our work, these citizens' grand juries and other endeavors. We'll send it to you for free. I want you to read it because I go through historically why we're at the point we're at. And Thomas Jefferson, who I believe was the greatest of our founding fathers, they were all great, but he was the greatest and the most farsighted and the most courageous. He predicted we would get to this point, and he predicted it would be violent. I'm trying to head off any violence. And that's why we are asserting our citizens' rights under the citizens' grand juries and Third Continental Congresses and other cases that we have going. So that being said, we will send to you these verdict forms in effect, which then gives us the go-ahead to prepare a fleshed out indictment. And we got to go through all of these 5 sessions that we've had. We're going to make it very precise. But if you find things that you want to modify with your jury foreman, you will do it because you're the ones that are making the decision here. But I am asking for indictments of Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, James Biden, John Kerry, and of course, Mitch McConnell at this time. And we'll be moving on every week. We'll be seeking indictments of others, whether it's James Comey, Andrew McCabe, all the people that brought this nation to its knees with fraudulent witch hunts and other people who were involved in illegalities. And we'll be also looking at the Attorney General of the United States, and not just in the Democrat administrations, but also the Republican administrations, as well as the FBI director, because they're in control. And they're subverting our Constitution, and they're violating our Bill of Rights. You just saw that with the interview of Rudy Giuliani. Whether you think he is guilty of a crime or not, what was done here was totally illegal. And the use of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which really has rarely ever been used, was used to indict General Mike Flynn. We know that. And now it will undoubtedly result in the indictment of Rudy Giuliani. The difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is the Republicans are afraid of their shadow and do nothing. But the Democrats will, as Giuliani just said, act as if they're the East German Stasi, and they'll go the maximum distance here to destroy anybody who will oppose them. And once the left takes control of this country, which it has, it doesn't intend to allow anyone in the future to retake that control. Remember that. And that's why it takes a revolution, a peaceful and legal revolution, to try to get the country back, to resurrect it from the dead, which is where it is right now, in effect. So that's all I have to say today. We'll be back in touch with you. You can contact me at leklayman@gmail.com. We can talk. I am your Citizens Grand Jury prosecutor, and we will take it from here Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Citizens Grand Jury.
And Larry, before we close for today, I want to remind our grand jurors and our internet audience that people can review previous sessions of the Citizens Grand Jury by going to freedomwatchusa.org. We've got them posted there. And of course, they can also visit the Freedom Watch YouTube channel, where each of the sessions have been simulcast. People can just subscribe to Freedom Watch on YouTube. It's absolutely free. Larry, YouTube is back in the business of removing subscribers from Freedom Watch. I don't know if you caught this interview at the World Economic Forum with YouTube's CEO, Susan W. I can barely pronounce her last name. But Larry, she flat out told the World Economic Forum that YouTube is suppressing content that they believe is not truthful. And I think we know how they feel about evidence and information surrounding Hunter Biden's laptop. So the message is being suppressed, and it's important that people review the material.
We know that. And I have a lawsuit that we brought. It went up to the Supreme Court, and there'll be more lawsuits in the future. So that's a legal and peaceful warning to YouTube, similar to Clint Eastwood, who used to say, as Dirty Harry, make my day. Okay, so this is where we are today. And we're not going to tolerate it. There's a threshold here that is causing action on behalf of people who have been maligned in this way. So we will get it out, and I'm not concerned. And this is, in fact, information the American people need, one way or the other. I'm doing a lot of talk radio these days. That's a free area that you can get things out to the American people as well.
Right.
So, and of course, we use some clips from Fox News, but Fox News is compromised too. But occasionally, some things get through. And Tucker Carlson, frankly, is doing a good job. I give him some credit. So
he's been bringing up some topics that I'm surprised to see in the mainstream news. I just want to remind people, Larry, that they can also listen to your podcast, Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. All of this information is available to people on freedomwatchusa.org. One convenient website they can go to review all the information, learn about Freedom Watch's work, and to make a tax-deductible contribution. Along the lines of finding the information elsewhere, I want to remind people that Crowdsource the Truth social media properties have been under attack. This video has been simulcast on Crowdsource the Truth forever. Thank you to all the viewers who have brought that channel to 1,000 subscribers in less than a month. And Larry, I also want to remind viewers they can always find Crowdsource the Truth videos at crowdsourcethetruth.com. And people can support Crowdsource the Truth by going to that webpage. We'll be back next week with another session of the Citizens Grand Jury. Larry, was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
Everybody stay safe. And as I say at the end of my podcast every day, listen to them. You can hear them at freedomwatchusa.org. The Father and the Son will only help those that help themselves. And it's time for the American people to help themselves peacefully and legally.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week. Larry, thank you so much. And thank you, jurors and viewers, for joining us. Have a great day, everyone. See you soon.